And so I show them from the perspective of, your mind is not built for sports performance. It's not what it's primarily designed for. It's designed for survival and protection first and foremost. But that default wiring is the obstacle that you need to overcome in terms of growth in your sport. Those who have played high performance sports are very successful because they get it. They know how to deal with failure. They know how to bounce back. They know how to be disciplined. They know how to be determined. And they learn that through sports. And so they have a huge advantage in the real world. Ultimately, what you're looking to do is become the greatest version of yourself. You're always in search of that growth. And when you're always in search of that growth, everything becomes either a win or a lesson, but ultimately it moves you in line with that growth that you're looking for, even those setbacks, right? And so from setbacks as well, I mean, one of the quotes that I love and I live by, and I share this with my athletes, is that when God wanted to make David a king, he didn't give him a crown, he gave him a Goliath to fight. And so I always look at that and say, if you want to be this version of yourself, those struggles are exactly what you need.
What's up, everybody? This is Simon. On this episode of the Ideal Hour podcast, I have Jason Sousa, who is a performance mindset coach for athletes. He's going to share some of his tips, not only for athletes, but also for kids that are athletes. And, he's a 3-time All-American in the NCAA and former USL champion, first-round draft pick. What's up with that? Jason, talk to me about these high stats I'm reading. What's going on with that?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, thanks for having me on the show. Excited to be here and have a fun conversation with you. And so the USL Championship, would be considered the second division of professional soccer in the U.S. So we have MLS, which is the highest level, and then the USL Championship, which is the second division. And so I was fortunate to get drafted to that level of soccer. And that seems like yesterday, but it was over 20 years ago, man.
Time flies for us, doesn't it, Jason? I mean, we're getting a little gray, a little bit older. Everything hurts.
Everything hurts now, that's for sure. Everything hurts, yeah.
Well, I'm glad that's a pretty big accomplishment, to be not only drafted, but even playing at that level. All right, let's talk a little bit about what you do now, which is basically mental coaching, prepping athletes mentally, because such a big part of performance in anything that we do, whether it's business or athletics, the mental aspect of it is so key. And for even sports that are team-oriented, it's a different dynamic than an individual sport such as tennis or golf. So let's get a little bit into that. Why did you decide to coach or become a mindset coach or performance coach for athletes?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it really comes from a place of a pain point for me. And so for me, my goal as a young athlete was always to get to the professional level. And I did. I got there, I got drafted, and it was very short-lived just because it wasn't from a lack of desire or lack of talent or abilities or physical preparation. Simply, I just hit all of the mental roadblocks that often stop so many athletes from progressing. And I really did not know how to navigate through that. I just really, at that time, I'd figured, I guess this is my ceiling. And it wasn't until much later on where I realized and started to dive into some of the mindset and mental performance stuff. And it was just a light bulb moment for me. It was like, oh my goodness, this is everything that I needed back then, which I wasn't aware of. And so for me, it's really about being the type of coach that I needed at that time. And that's why I'm really passionate about what I do.
Wow. And what, is it a lot from upbringing, or is it, like the youth today? Do you think the youth that performs today has a great, say, father figure or a mentor, or is it upbringing, or are parents just hiring mental coaches, or having a good coach on a team plays a big role? I mean, why would you say you felt you had a roadblock versus some of the things that you're seeing are improving on in students?
Yeah, I think the dynamic of youth sports has changed a lot. And so for me, there was a certain level of freedom to play at the youth level and then figure things out at the high school, college level. And then for me, the roadblocks hit at the professional level where the pressure was extremely high. And the level there was extremely high, and the competition was extremely high. But when you think about the youth sports dynamic now, I mean, we've put these kids under such severe pressure and expectations at such a young age that they're dealing with a lot of these mental roadblocks early on. And so I didn't experience it till, 21 or so when I was drafted professionally, but I'm dealing with athletes who are dealing with it as young as 12 years old. And a lot of the conversation is, hey, you need to be this good at 12 years old so that you can get to this program at 14, which allows you to play at this high school, which gets you to college. All right. And so we've put all this pressure and expectation at such a young age, and it's coming with a lot of these mental roadblocks and a lot of pressure for these young kids.
You know what? It really is. And just I have two kids, 10 and 9, that are close to that age. And it seems like the parents not only put the pressure on the kid, but they also, especially these like soccer moms, for example, they do it for bragging rights. But that is a lot of pressure. Is that pressure healthy for the child itself to be in such an environment of performance, or do you feel it could give or take? I mean, what do you see out there? Because I've seen, parents really drag their kid from one event to another event to another event to another event, where they're not having any time for play or friendships or outdoor and activities and so forth.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of pressure, and it sounds like you have a 10 and 9-year-old. I have 4. My oldest are 10 and 9, so I certainly relate, and they play sports. But one of the big things is I don't have their identity tied to sports, which has a lot of pressure on there. And as you mentioned, for a lot of these parents who are trying to live out their second dream through their kids, and you can imagine how much pressure that puts on these kids. But in terms of the impact that it has, I mean, right now, sports is such a wonderful tool to teach, these young kids life skills that perhaps they don't learn in school. And so I'm a big advocate for these young kids to be playing sports. But the reality is 70% of them will stop playing sports at the age of 13 altogether, just because they cannot deal with that level of pressure and some of the mental challenges that come with high performance sports. And so we are doing a disservice to this young generation by not providing them the mental tools that allow them to continue playing sports and seeing what they can do through that journey.
So what are some of the things we can go into that would maybe make sports desirable for a youth? Or what are some of the roadblocks that you can prevent from happening? And what are some of the teachings that you convey to your youth athletes or even athletes out there?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is I've learned through this process, and I've been doing this for a little bit of time now. And so even how I've kind of developed as a mental performance coach, a lot of things that I used to teach has really evolved into a deeper transformation. And so I think it's really important as we're teaching the kids, here's how the game works. Here's how, the rules of the game works. Here is how your body works, and here's how you develop your body. One of the big components we don't do with these athletes is here's how your mind works. Right. And here's how your mind could potentially hold you back in different areas in terms of you being able to develop focus or confidence or managing nerves and emotions and dealing with pressure. And we don't do a very good job. And when you think about an athlete, all the pillars of developing an athlete, mind being one of them, how many sports organizations right now are doing a very good job of diving into that specific with the athletes? And it's very few. We kind of just hope that they'll figure that piece out on their own. Right here, we'll teach you the skills, we'll teach you the rules, we'll help you develop the strength and coordination. And when it comes to the mental side of things, hopefully you figure that out on your own. Right. But there's ways, right? There's really is ways to teach them that. And it really starts at the basis of here's how your mind works and here's how you overcome some of those mental roadblocks. But we don't do that right now. We simply don't.
Yeah. And are you starting to see coaches implement that, or parents implement that, or are they hiring, individuals like yourself to prepare a high performing athlete?
Yeah, some sports organizations are now starting to implement, and I think we're going to see a lot more growth in mental performance over the next few years, which is really exciting. And for me, that's one of the big missions I'm on, is that we need to make this a component of athletic development, especially at the young ages, so that we can retain these young athletes and make sure that they have the opportunity to play sports right through high school. But a lot of them right now don't have that resources, which is why I think, I've had a lot of success and perhaps some of the growth that I've had on the social media platforms in a short period of time is because a lot of these young athletes and a lot of these parents are really seeking this type of information, and it's not readily available. And they can really resonate with some of the pain points and how it's impacting their kids, right? Now, as a father myself and as a father yourself, right, the last thing we want is to see our kids struggling with confidence or not being able to overcome fear. These are not just sports lessons, these are life lessons, right? And so we want them to have the tools to be able to navigate through that.
Are you doing this through affirmations, or what does a routine or a coaching session look like?
Yeah, so, with me, I really developed this specific curriculum or framework that I teach athletes in terms of mental performance. So when I first got into this mental performance, a lot of it is, I don't want to say surface level fixes, but a lot of it just doesn't go deep enough, where we talk about, how we manage some of our thoughts or how we manage some of our feelings, and to a certain extent putting a band-aid on some of these things. But when you think about really having a transformation, a lot of those thoughts and feelings come from a place of identity and belief systems, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's not just about here's how you're going to breathe through certain situations, and here's how I want you to kind of reframe your focus in certain situations. For me, I really dive in to here is how your mind operates. And so I show them from the perspective of, your mind is not built for sports performance. It's not what it's primarily designed for. It's designed for survival and protection first and foremost. But that default wiring is the obstacle that you need to overcome in terms of growth in your sport. And so what I really do is we often hear that you versus you mentality, which is often, hear it all over the place. But if you ask a young athlete, what is that you versus you mentality, that's a very confusing thing for a young athlete to navigate through. So I really break it down to, it is how your mind is wired versus who it is that you are and who it is that you want to be. So really it's your mission. It's really your mind versus your mission. And now you can utilize the competitive nature of a young athlete. And now I give them a real competition that they have all the time. And so here's how the mind will hold you back in terms of confidence. And here's how you would build real confidence based on who it is you want to be. And here's how the mind holds you back in terms of focus. And here is how you will utilize focus based on who you want to be. And so all of the different aspects of mental performance, I'm able to break it down and make that you versus you really, this is how your mind is wired versus this is who it is that you want to be. And through there, now I've raised their level of awareness in terms of understanding how the mind works, which gives them a level of choice, which gives them power. And now they start to take different action because of it. They start to speak differently to themselves because of it. They start to think differently because of it and focus on different areas because of it. And now through all of those different aspects, they're able to rewire their mindset from a deeper purpose, which has that lasting transformation, which we're looking for.
So it sounds like identity of who you want to be or who you envision yourself wanting to be is an important question at the base of your training and coaching. Have you come across youth that can't identify themselves? And then does it get deeper? Or, sometimes I look at a kid at an event, right? And I go, wow, that kid is performing. Like you could tell they're meant for this, or they're, top level performer, versus another kid kind of just doesn't really care, doesn't have a spark. How do you, if they can't identify that spark, or do you tell the parents hey, this person's not the star, Serena Williams tennis player you think they are, or they're not the next Messi? How do you get to that level?
Yeah, well, I mean, first, parents often, we're parents as well, right? We want to believe that our kids are the next Messi, but there's only far few between. But the reality is, you're absolutely right. There has to be an innate passion for that sport, right? Because if, there's always a bigger picture when I'm working with these athletes, which the same type of framework I'm teaching you for you to be great in sports is the same framework you can use for all areas of your life, right? And as a parent to an ex, we don't know if our kids are going to move on to the next phase of sports, but they're all going to move on to the next phase of life. But really that passion that they have for their sport is the vehicle that I can use to really teach this. And so if they don't have that passion for that particular sport, that's a conversation with mom and dad. It's like, hey, you know what, this seems like more your narrative than it is the athlete, right? And so why is that athlete going to want to go through this kind of transformation if it doesn't apply to them right now, right? And so for a 14-year-old, if I said to little Timmy, hey, you're going to go through this coaching, this mindset coaching, which is really going to transform you so that later on when you're 25, 30, this is going to have a huge impact on your career. That doesn't mean anything to a 14-year-old. But for a 14-year-old who wants to be great at their sport right now, that means the world to them, right? And so having that innate passion is really important.
How would you motivate a kid that doesn't have that drive? Is there a way or techniques? And as you mentioned, it's not just necessarily in sports. It's motivating them to clean their room or thinking a little bit bigger down the road. What advice would you give to parents to stay on their kid, but not crack them or break them in a way where it becomes you're just either being aggressive or demanding something of them and they're not willing? Like, how do you motivate someone, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, for me, it's always understanding their deeper why and who it is that they want to be, right? And so with an athlete or with the child, even my kids, I can hold them accountable to who they say they want to be, right? And so now it's like, what type of person do you want to be? And these are the character traits of who I want to be, and I can hold you accountable to that. And for me, I'm okay with pushing them in the areas of character building, right? Like we can't always push them in terms of performance because there's a lot of factors there. We don't always control outcomes, but we do control our processes, right? And so for me, it's like, who do you want to be? You told me this is who you want to be, whether athlete, student, or person, and I'm going to hold you accountable to that version of you through the different character traits that is important to become that type of person, right? So really, it's about holding them accountable to who it is they want to be versus who we want them to be.
I love that. So the big take is ask your kids, who do they want to be or who do they vision themselves being down the road, and then holding themselves accountable to that image versus the image that you have in your mind of them being the next Michael Jordan or whoever it may be that you put out there. What transitioned? You mentioned earlier you were a star athlete, but why become a mindset coach? Is it a career that you've always kind of wanted to explore, or you always found a way or found out that you needed to develop your own mind, or what was kind of that journey like for you?
Yeah, no, I didn't see myself necessarily getting into this particular area of expertise. Really, when I finished up my playing career and realized, okay, this is the end for me, my big goal was to get back into coaching and coach at the college level. And so I went back and did my master's in education with a focus in sports, and started to get certified in different areas of coaching, not necessarily mental performance. And then from there, you start to realize that a lot of these athletes are starting to have the same type of mental roadblocks that I had. And that's when I started to dive in as I was trying to become a better coach, just as an on-field coach, but really start to implement some of the other things. Then I took the time to educate myself in some of these other areas. And then that was really the light bulb moment. It's like, wow, this is such a huge component of athletic development that gets completely overmissed. And I know firsthand what that looks like. And so really start to dive into that. And so I was really a coach that was doing a lot of the performance stuff, coaching teams, implementing some of the mindset stuff. And it wasn't until some of the parents and athletes that I work with that said, hey, you should start really sharing this stuff on some of the social media platforms, because this would really resonate with a lot of people. I didn't have any social media. I still don't know how it works. And people ask, like, how did you grow that quick? And I'm like, generally, I don't have any clue. I'm just trying to share information that hopefully resonates with parents and athletes. And then it was really from there, I was like, wow, there's such a huge opportunity here. I can see how much, these young athletes and parents are struggling to navigate through that. And so from there, it's just become my absolute passion to work with these athletes. And it's interesting, when you're a young athlete, all you want to do is become so good at your craft. And now, like, I haven't had that level of passion for something since I was a young athlete. And now it's like, oh my goodness, this is like, I love everything about this. I want to educate myself. I want to get better. I want to be around the people who are going to make me get better. And so having that drive again that you had as a young athlete, it's nice to rediscover that.
It's amazing how many things when we're younger seem so fun and energetic and exciting. And then when you get older, very seldom do we land on something that all of a sudden creates this spark and drive again, or this passion or love or emotion. And that's cool that you found that in this, in helping people, and at the same time helping the youth. So kudos to you. Let's talk about some of the other challenges you see in youth and athletes nowadays. Social media obviously is a big distraction, but at the same time, it could give you information, just like your information you're putting out there. Yeah. So how do you counter that as a parent?
Yeah, that is such a big challenge, right? And we're having those same challenges now at home, right? Trying to manage the screen time, and it's interesting, not to get off topic, but our main TV, we have this beautiful Samsung frame TV that's sitting on our wall. I don't know if you know what it is, but for
I
whatever
love
reason,
those.
yeah, beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful. It's stuck on a sports picture right now, but for whatever reason, the remote stopped working, and so we had to replace it. So we kind of took a while to get that replaced. We're still in the process, but what's interesting, what we discovered is with the TV gone, all of a sudden the kids didn't have that as just like that kind of resource, and so all of a sudden they're outside playing basketball more. They're picking up a book. They're doing some colorings and drawings, and it was almost like a wow, like this is such an interesting concept here that we don't have access to screen times, and they naturally have a sense of creativity that they can go to. And so now we're like, do we even replace the remote control at this point? You know what I mean? But no, it is such a distraction, right? It is such a distraction. And for me, I always challenge the athletes because I think that is a level of discipline, right? It's always your mind versus your mission. You told me you want to be this, but your mind is always looking for that level of comfort or the path of least resistance. And so it always wants to tell you, just pick up your phone and just scroll through there and just kind of scroll mindlessly. And that is part of that battle, which I say is it's your mind versus your mission. Is this in line with the mission that you're on in terms of who you want to be? And so we talk about that battle, right? Who won today? Was it your mind or was it your mission, right? And sometimes you have to say your mind, and hey, that's not in line with who it is that you want to be. But it is a huge distraction. I think if you don't know how to navigate through that, it becomes very difficult. But also having resources in terms of managing screen times. I think parents need to be able to manage screen times because these young kids, they don't do a very good job of managing it themselves. And I think, we'll find out.
And the companies make it addicting. I mean, it's not just the kid's fault. It's like sugar to a kid. Adults have the same issues, scroll, and they cannot get off. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, no, and we can see that firsthand. And so it's good to, not necessarily good, but it's good that we experience that firsthand so we can understand, like, yeah, it'd be, a lot of parents are hypocritical to say that we want, our kids to stop scrolling when they fall victim to that same thing as well, right? And so, and even when I see these kids when they're going through, like my kids watching if they're on YouTube and you watch these YouTube shorts and you're watching, it's like it's every 30 seconds, you can just see the dopamine hit and how that impacts their level of attention. And it's like, hey, we can't allow this. This is not in line with who it is that you want to be, right? And so just managing that as parents, I think we need to help these kids for sure.
Jason, so you're basically saying we need to do a trick and turn off the Wi-Fi every so often and see where the hell this all takes the family.
It's, as I said, it just happened naturally. And I was like, oh my God, it was almost a discovery for me. I was like, wow, like this, if they don't have that as a resource, then they have to find other ways to entertain themselves, right? And yeah, I think we're probably in that same generation. You got to go outside and figure out something to do. And so now they've gravitated to finding things to do, which is very much in line with creation as opposed to just comfort, right? It's a difference between being a consumer and being someone who creates.
I love that. Yeah, I'm gonna do that one of these days and see if we still stick together as a unit.
Yeah.
I'll let you know how it goes. If the podcast is gone and burned down, then you'll know it wasn't a good thing. All right, what do you think? Why do you think mentally athletes don't come forward and discuss mental health nowadays? Like, it's better nowadays than it was, years ago, because people, I think, are more comfortable in opening up and saying, hey, something's not right. But why do you think there's just this big, not only block, but a block from them opening up about their issues with mental health?
Yeah, great question. I think there's still that stigma there. We're often told that that your mind is such a powerful tool, right? And so when we deal with any level of fear and doubt, oftentimes we think it's because we're mentally weak, and we don't want to admit that as an athlete because that is a hindrance to us having success. But I often look at the terminology of mentally weak versus mentally strong a little bit different, and so we all have those levels of fear or doubt, and we all deal with those limiting beliefs. And to the extent that you are misidentified with your mind, I would say, in terms of your mind having the control over the narrative, what I would say is where you have some mental weakness versus, where you're fully separated from that, and you understand what the mind generates fear and doubt and holds on to past limiting beliefs. and being able to separate from that and making choice otherwise, I think that I would define as someone being mentally strong. And so when I'm working with a young athlete and they're like, I'm having all these fears and doubts, and it's like, you're not mentally broken. Your mind is doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's just you haven't understood how to make that separation from your mind, right? And we're so misidentified with our thoughts and that inner voice. And you can see if you think you and your mind are the same thing, you can see why you think, you could be mentally weak. But as an athlete, you'd never want to admit that you're mentally weak because you understand it's important to be mentally strong. And so for these athletes, I mean, if there's an athlete out there, it's not you're mentally broken. You just haven't learned how to stop letting your mind take the lead, right? But your mind is doing exactly what it's designed to do. And so getting over that stigma so that you can do the work to make sure that you understand how to take control of your mind, because having control of your mind allows you to have control of your career. And if you don't, that becomes the roadblock, as I know firsthand.
Yeah, the past keeps blocking you from excelling or doing great, to your point. And what you mentioned was mentally strong is recognizing what happened in the past and then overcoming that objective or that block. And succeeding in whatever you do. And I'm glad more athletes are opening up nowadays. Who are some of, if you could name, whether it's in soccer or football or basketball, who are some of these athletes today you think are on their mental A game? And obviously professional level, it's probably everybody just to get to that level. But in reality, there are even standouts from those professionals as well.
In terms of examples of mindset?
Yeah, mindset, like really tough athletes that you would go, man, that guy will perform nonstop.
Yeah, I think there's, for me, there's some of the Mount Rushmores of mindsets when it comes to sports, right? And so, some of the guys who are retired, Kobe obviously being one that stands out in terms of Mamba mentality for sure. Michael Jordan being one, more modern day, Cristiano Ronaldo would be one that I'd really resonate with. And Cristiano Ronaldo, when we look at the debate of the Ronaldo Messi, right? And we often have that debate, right? And so, people who know soccer, know footy, they can see that just in terms of a natural talent, Messi is the more gifted, for sure. He's the most gifted athlete that we've seen in this game for a long, long time, which often, only gives a stronger argument to Cristiano Ronaldo for what he's been able to accomplish, because without that level of talent, but with that level of mindset that he's had and that work rate and that belief, he's been able to even put himself in the conversation with someone who should be, standalone, number one over this last generation. And through that, just that mental fortitude, he's put himself in that conversation. I think people don't give him enough credit for that, but I think he's there. And then we have other ones, Djokovic in tennis. I mean, we have a lot of great examples, but a lot of them are getting this level of coaching at the mental side of things, which is why they've been able to have such success in their sport.
At that level, do you think Messi and Cristiano have coaches as well, or do you think they're just so mindset prepared that they're fine?
No, they definitely have coaches, and you even hear some of them. Djokovic has spoken about his, and LeBron speaking about his, and a lot of these professional clubs, they all have sports psychologists and different people working on the mental side of things. And a lot of the books that I read are from coaches who work on this side of things, who have gone in and worked with these organizations and some of these top performers, right? I think about like a Michael Jordan or a Kobe Bryant. I mean, they both worked with guys like Tim Grover as an example, or George Mumford. These are guys who I look up to in terms of this particular area, and books that I really resonate to. And so they've all have received coaching in this particular area. And these are guys who are obsessed at getting better, right? And so they're going to look at every little detail in terms of how they can maximize on their performance.
We got to throw Tom Brady in there. He's also one that talked about therapy and coaching a lot, and obviously the GOAT.
Yeah, no, and it's great, right? We need these guys who had such a high level of success, the big names to come out and say, that I've received this level of coaching, this level of therapy, so that we can normalize it, so that athletes who are really struggling and they feel like it's a weakness for them to admit that they're going through this or that they need this type of guidance, they can come out and say, hey, if the greats are doing it, then this is an opportunity, right? More than anything else. And it's not necessarily therapy as it is, coaching in an area of your game that you're going to need to have success.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk a little bit about social media. You mentioned you have seen success. You didn't know what you were doing with social media, and every time there's a software update, where it's a little tough to keep up, etc. How important has social media been to your business and brand building for your coaching programs?
Yeah, it's really been the avenue that's driven the success that I've had, and it's allowed me to go from being someone who works with athletes locally to who works with athletes globally, right? And it just changes the dynamic real quickly. And so you go from someone who working in a very small geographical area to all of a sudden now, working with athletes from Australia and Singapore and Dubai and all through Europe, all through the US. So in terms of having that impact, in terms of being able to reach so many people and share my message, I think has been huge. So, I mean, social media has been an unbelievable platform for that very reason. And as someone who was very hesitant to jump on Instagram before, and now it's been the reason why I've been able to positively impact so many people. And so it's a huge part of my business now.
Is there any gripes about you having to be on social media all the time? I mean, it's a lot of posting and editing and.
Yeah, it's a lot of what I teach with my athletes is a lot of the framework that I use to have success, right? And so you have to, as I tell my athletes, you have to get through the period where you suck at something to get good at something, right? So you got to put out those first videos where now you look back, you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that I put this stuff out there. It's terrible, but you have to do it, right? You have to get out of your comfort zone. It's about being comfortable, getting uncomfortable, and so putting those videos out, allowed me to get to this place. But yeah. It was uncomfortable at first, to say the least.
Has anyone recognized you anywhere, like publicly or on the street or in the arenas or?
I have, yeah. I was at a Walmart once, and I kept seeing like a young, girl. It might have been about 12, 13, and she kept looking over, and I can hear her saying something wrong. I didn't make much of it, and then the mom came over. It's like, oh, we watch all of your videos, and she loves all your videos, and thank you so much. And that means the world. And sometimes you'll just get messages and say, hey, your video really resonated with me, or I used some of your tips this weekend, and it really helped my young athlete perform. Saying, thank you so much. And that, that just means the world when you hear that. You just want to be able to help so many people.
That's great. What you mentioned earlier, some of the mentors or people you look up to as you build your career here in coaching. You mentioned some books or these people have written some books and so forth. What are some of the books? You have a few in the background there, The Confident Mind. What are some of these books that you recommend people read to develop their mindset as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge reader now. I'm an avid reader. I never thought I'd say that at 18 years old, but now reading has become like my favorite hobby ever. But I'm always reading in terms of things that are going to help educate me. For me, it's about developing myself. The more I develop myself, the more I can develop the athletes, right? So the better version of me is the better coach of me. And so if I had to recommend books, definitely The Confident Mind is certainly one that is up there. I'm reading one now. One of my, I'd say one of my mentors is this guy here, which is Steve Magnus, right? And so I love his books. This one here, Win the Inside Game, is very much in line with how I teach my athletes. Other ones, Relentless by Tim Grover, great one. Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. I don't recommend that for the younger ages. Certain vocabulary in there that is not for them. And How Champions Think by Rotella is another big one. And so there's a lot of great resources, especially if you're a high school athlete or a college athlete and you really want to take some resources that's going to help your game. There's a lot of great books out there.
What's there's a lot of high school athletes. I played in high school basketball. Obviously, what are the chances nowadays? Like, I look at a youth athlete today and compared to a youth athlete, like 20 years ago or 30 years ago, and there's really no comparison. I think they're more agile, they're faster in some cases, they're more aware. The training has evolved, whether it's from the Steph Curry type agility to running a 40, etc. What are the chances of a youth to make it to any professional sports nowadays? I would imagine it's very slim.
In terms of the opportunities to get to the highest level?
Correct. Like a professional level.
Yeah, no, in terms of the probabilities, I mean, we can do the math on it. We know the statistics behind it. It gets very challenging as you go, from high school to college and then to the professional level. And certainly in terms of the level of training that these kids are getting now, it's far more than we are, right? And so even in my particular sport in soccer, sometimes I hear the guys who I play with, the guys I used to play with, and I'm telling them, like, these kids are way better than we were. They just way more resources, and like, no, we were better. I'm like, you guys are out of your mind. These kids have it all, right? Like, they're getting professional training and information at a young age that we didn't have. I think the caveat to that is that some of them are overcoached, and so there's, in certain sports, possession sports, perhaps, soccer and hockey and basketball, perhaps there's a lack of creativity because there's so much coaching where it becomes very automatic and pattern and robotic. But in terms of them being able to get there, I think the big thing when I always tell the athletes is what is it that you want to achieve? More so that goal that you have for that particular goal in your sports journey. Who do you need to become in order to give yourself that goal? And in pursuit of that goal, regardless of you go and achieve it or not, do you become a better version of yourself? And the answer is always yes. And so for me, it's about who you become on that journey more than it is in terms of the achievement. And so for myself, as an example, I want to be considered one of the greats in this particular area. I want to be considered the Steve Magnuses and the Tim Grovers and all these guys at the highest level. And I probably will never get there. But I love who I will become in pursuit of that goal. And for me, that's what it's about.
Yeah, basically saying it's not always at the end goal, it's the journey along is what you're referring to better yourself and better those around you. What happens to athletes? I've never reached these high professional athletic positions or anything like that. But there are people out there that have put so much time, effort, dedication, blood, sweat, tears, so to speak, to get to college and then maybe to try out for the pros or whatever in any sport, right? What happens to an individual when they realize, or from your experience, when they realize that they're not making it, they're not getting to that next level, might be it, because so much time from the youth, from 8 years old, 7 years old and on until they're 18, 19, 20, have been put into them developing themselves to be this type of professional. And then maybe that door closes. What do you see happening in the mind?
Yeah, a lot of that depends on the conversations that they're having with others and themselves through that journey, right? It's when you start to tell yourself that I have to make it and this is everything, now all of a sudden you've taken away any level of freedom, right? And so you've essentially tied your identity to your sport. And I think that's where a lot of athletes struggle with that transition, is because I am a basketball player versus basketball something that I do, right? And I want to go pro. I really want to go pro versus I have to go pro. And those are two different ways that you look at it. And so for the athletes who understand that this is a journey and there's an opportunity there, and they want that, if they fall short of that, regardless of that, who they became in terms of that level of discipline and resilience and confidence and mental fortitude, once they're able to overcome that, they have a certain level of tools, mental tools that they can utilize to be successful in anything. And if you look in all of the different areas of business that I've been in, even outside of athletics, those who have played high performance sports are very successful because they get it. They know how to deal with failure. They know how to bounce back. They know how to be disciplined. They know how to be determined. And they learn that through sports. And so they have a huge advantage in the real world. But those who completely tie their identity to sports, I think that's the tougher transition. And so for the athletes out there, I would say, the sport that you play is part of who you are, but it's not all of who you are. And make sure that you have that separation. And that doesn't mean that you can't go all in. Go all in knowing that who you become regardless is ultimately the big win, because you'll be set up to be successful in all areas of your life.
I love that. Yeah, it's don't identify yourself as that. It's the person achieving that is what I'm getting out of it. How do you teach your athletes to celebrate their wins and deal with their setbacks? Obviously, sport is a win or a setback, right? In some cases, at the final judgment of it. So how do you approach both of those?
Yeah, interesting enough, I was having this conversation with my 10-year-old 2 weekends ago where he had a tournament. He was really struggling. a lot of things weren't going his way. And, on an individual level, he struggled. From a team performance level, he struggled. And I said to him, I said, son, this weekend you took a lot of L's, right? You took a lot of L's. I said, but it's up to you whether those L's stand for losses or lessons, right? And so when you look at it from the perspective of ultimately what you're looking to do is become the greatest version of yourself. And you're always in search of that growth. And when you're always in search of that growth, everything becomes either a win or a lesson, but ultimately it moves you in line with that growth that you're looking for, even those setbacks, right? And so from setbacks as well, I mean, one of the quotes that I love and I live by, and I share this with my athletes, is that when God wanted to make David a king, he didn't give him a crown, he gave him a Goliath to fight. And so I always look at that and say, if you want to be this version of yourself, those struggles are exactly what you need. They're not to be, you don't need to shy away from them or be disappointed. It's for you to embrace, because those are the pathway to become who it is that you said you wanted to become. And so from that perspective, nothing becomes, necessarily a setback or a failure. It becomes all part of the journey, right? And so it's about wins and lessons for me.
Wins and lessons. I love that, instead of losses. And God doesn't just hand everything over. He makes you earn it. So, yeah. So that's a very good point. What is peak performance in your mind? Like zoned in peak performance for an athlete, youth or adult?
Yeah, peak performance is, we often talk about flow state, and there's a lot of different, variations and theories on that. And, we talk about flow state, but to get into a flow state on a consistent basis is the most difficult thing. If it was that easy, we'd all be in a flow state all the time. But I think for me, it's that ability, obviously to be present, but also to be fully committed to what you want, but be completely unattached to the outcomes, right? Like winning is something that I want always, right? But it is, that desire to win versus that need to win, right? And so I'm completely committed to what it is that I'm looking to do, but I'm completely unattached to the outcomes, right? And so from my perspective, I am looking to become, one of the greatest mindset coaches for athletes out there, right? And I love what I do every day, but I'm unattached to that outcome in the sense that is the only way for me to be successful, because I love what I do. And so when you're just in love with what you're doing, you're just completely immersed in there. Now you're in a state of peak performance. And for my athletes, if you're not there enjoying what you want to do, you're never going to find that level of peak performance. And the majority of athletes, I would say, because the mind is built for survival, most athletes get into this place where they're in survival mode, where they're trying to avoid what they don't want. And that puts a high level of tension on them, and they're never in this place of peak performance, versus being able to let go and accepting the things that you don't want as a possibility, so that you can just free yourself to think about all the things that you do want. And so my athletes, I say, have the desire to succeed, but you better have the courage to fail, because those go hand in hand. And now you can free yourself to be able to perform.
Yeah, and don't identify yourself just to win or just to achieve that goal. Because I think another thing I want to add to that from what I'm getting is, when you only focus on wins as a youth or a kid growing up, and you don't, it could really be a setback. And so it could be also a depressing part of the journey. And I think we didn't talk about that, but how often do you deal with depression from these, say, setbacks, which are lessons, not losses, you've described? Is that prevalent in today's youth that you're seeing, or in athletes as well?
Yeah, I wouldn't know if I would say necessarily go into the term depression. I think there's a difference between, whether you have sports, performance anxiety or some disappointments from performance, versus dealing with something at a deeper psychological level that I think needs to be addressed, whether that's, some childhood trauma or otherwise. And so, and again, it's that ability to separate yourself from your sport, number one, and to be able to separate yourself from your mind and understand how the mind works, so you can start to see some of the patterns that might put you into those states of, anxiety or fear or worry. And so a lot of that work that I do, as I said, is less about mental training, more about mental separation and mental freedom. Like, this is how your mind works, and this is how your mind can pull you. If you think about how the mind works in terms of survival. And sometimes we see this with athletes. You go from today, and what if I don't perform well? And if I don't perform well today, what is that going to do for me tomorrow? And then all of a sudden we went from today might be a bad day to now we've looked 5 years down the road in all terms of worst case scenarios and how my life is going to pan out, because the mind is very good at doing it, at predicting all the worst case scenarios as a means of protecting us. And you can see how that can create a lot of anxiety and sadness, right? And so being able to show them those patterns so they can realize, wait a minute, that's not actually me. My mind is simply doing what it's designed to do, and break that pattern and get out of that spiral, because we'll spiral real quick, and choose different thoughts and choose different focus otherwise. So that certainly helps in terms of stopping people from navigating all the way down that rabbit hole, as we often say. But in terms of that depression, I think it's important that we are able, again, just to separate their identity from the sport. Because if your identity is tied to that sport, that means every time you perform, your identity is on the line. That's a lot of pressure. And when your identity is on the line, it doesn't go well. It's really easy to spiral. And if you don't make that separation, it's you're going to get there quickly.
I see. Sounds like there's layers to it. Depression's like a very bottom layer if you're not addressing some of the other outcomes earlier. Fear is a big one, right? Anyone that steps on the stage, whether you're a youth, adult, all of a sudden you get this butterfly feeling, like perform, fear. How or what do you recommend to combat that, aside from maybe the identity part of this is who I am? How can someone calm their anxiety at that stage, at that moment, and then get over that first fear hump? I say, that happens in the first minute or two of any kind of event.
Yeah, great question. I think first and foremost, and for those who struggle with fear, is our fears are far bigger in our mind than they are in reality, right? And so with a lot of athletes, what often happens is the things that they fear, let's say they get the thought of, oh my goodness, what if I don't perform well? And they have that fear, and they try to suppress that thought. They don't really deal with it. And so what ends up happening is that thought resurfaces at the worst time, right before a game or during the middle of a game, and all of a sudden they're like dealing with this, and you can imagine the level of tension when you're dealing with what you don't want when you need to perform at your very best. And so one tactic that I use with my athletes, which is a really powerful one, is we call it, walk your mind to the edge. And so we look at it and say, what's your next performance, and what is the worst case scenario? What are the things you fear? Whether it's not performing well, making mistakes, losing this game. Let's put it all out there, and then ask, could you handle this? Like, if this actually happened, could you handle this? And, typically the answer is yes. And if the answer is no, then that is where you don't have any level of freedom to perform. But really it's when you look at it, it's like, yeah, it's going to suck. And, I may disappoint a few people, and then what? And then next day I got to go back to work and then do it again. Okay, so could you handle that? And do you have a plan to bounce back if it happens? Because now all of a sudden we've already mentally prepared for the thing that we're most worried about. And so we free ourselves from the power that fear holds over us. It's not this cloud overhanging us, because we already know what that looks like. I've already walked my mind to the edge. I know what that looks like. And now I've freed myself to just focus on what I want to happen, because the fear is always greater in our mind than it is in reality. And if you know in advance, I can handle that, then you've freed yourself to just focus on what you want. And now we have a level of freedom. That's the freedom that athletes are looking for.
Yeah, I love that. If you could work with any athlete out there, you could pick, and they would have to say yes, who are some of the athletes you would work with today?
Wow, man. I think some of the ones that I named, just to get into their head and really understand. I mean, my boys are soccer players, and so Cristiano Ronaldo is their idol, and we have Ronaldo themed birthday parties here at the house. And so, to be able to tell them, hey, I'm working with Cristiano Ronaldo, but more so just to really study them and understand what's going on in your mind, and what can I take from here that I can extract and be able to use with my athletes, right, from such a high level. I think that one comes to mind first and foremost. But, for me, besides that, I just generally love working with athletes who are very dedicated and coachable and just want to become the best version of themselves. Because those athletes who come to me with that level of dedication and desire, I can have a huge impact on them. Always, right?
I mean, that's a good mind to crack if you could get it there. I always thought Cristiano was, he's always slender, he's always in shape. So I'm not the biggest soccer fan. I grew up watching basketball more than soccer, and soccer, I think, in America has been booming, and with David Beckham kind of creating the whole Miami scene, and then Messi coming over. But I always thought of Cristiano as more athletically built than Messi, and because he's taller, so you know, he hovers over people a little bit than Messi. But you're telling me here that gifted wise, talent wise, or skill set wise, Messi in soccer is considered more adaptive, or what? Why would you say that? I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, just I mean, if you're a soccer fan, you just see their natural movements and their natural decision making and their ability to see the game and the different things that they can do. I mean, Messi's a different player; he's got more tools, and things just look a lot more natural. Where Ronaldo had to do the work, right? And if he didn't have that level of dedication and discipline and that type of mentality that he has, he wouldn't have that level of success, where Messi probably would have still found it, because you can see it's more natural in him, you know. And so he's certainly an athlete that I admire from a mental standpoint. You know, the other person I would say, and it's unfortunate because I think Kobe Bryant, after his career, and it's so unfortunate that we lost him so early, he probably had so much insight for young athletes, right? If we could tap into him, and Kobe's such an interesting character, because who he was on the court and who he was off the court are two completely different things. And he even created that alter ego, right? The Mamba, the Black Mamba on the court. And then you see him in interviews and podcasts, and he's so calm and so collected, and he's so insightful and very, very articulate. And, that level of Kobe, I would love to see, because I think he would have been such a gem for young athletes to be able to extract. Here's what works for me from a mental standpoint.
Yeah, very interesting. Kobe was, I would say, the closest to Jordan, and with mentality and desire for the game, I'd put LeBron after them, and because I just don't think he has that mentality, skip a preseason game and get, injured in it. I'll say it like it is. Some people love him, some don't, but Kobe, even past Jordan, I would say, outshined him in the after, like, business speaking world. Jordan has done a few things, but it seems like he likes his privacy. And Kobe was like really out there doing things, and maybe it's the youth in him. But yes, very sad to lose. That whole 2020 on has been a weird time, and I think there's still a lot to learn from him. That mentality is great. All right, so as we kind of wrap up this podcast, is there anything that you would encourage your own kids to do more of today? I think that is a big one for any parent out there. What are you pushing them into? Where do you see things going? Because the dynamic of being a kid today has changed than it was, 20 years ago. And I'm seeing a lot of parents pushing their kids not only in the professional athletic realm, but also at the same time pushing them to promote themselves on social media in their athletic realm as well. It's kind of interesting. I don't know if you're seeing that in your coaching.
Yeah, no, I see it all the time. Sometimes you get an outreach from someone on Instagram, and it's looks like it's an 8-year-old athlete, and you're like, well, who's reaching out to me? But it's managed by the mom and dad, and they have a question about mental performance. But in terms of my kids, my big thing for me is, because I understand mindset at a deeper level, perhaps now than I did in the past, I'm very intentional about some of the language specifically, right? And there's certain things that I don't allow to be said in my house, right? The words like I can't, and I'm not good at, and it's impossible, and it's not my fault. And these create a mindset that I don't want, whether it's victimhood or, excuses or limitations, right? And so even the language that we use, I'm very specific with my kids. The language you use today is shapes the future you have tomorrow. And is this something that you want for your future? And then to explore different areas of creativity, right? And so that's where I get excited when they go out and try different sports, or they go and read, or they're going to go. Yesterday I was applauding them because they were making comic books in their room, right? And I want them to explore their level of creativity, because I think creativity and joy, even from sports, we've lost a little bit about that. It's become about very regiment, do the work. And so, having that level of creativity, having that level of joy is the thing that will sustain their passion for them to have long-term success. And so never allow them to lose that level of creativity, that level of joy, that level of exploration, I would say. They should never lose it in something that they're passionate about, because that is going to be the thing that drives them forward.
I love that. And it's kind of goes back to what you said earlier. A lot of the coaches nowadays, in the way that they're coaching athletes, it's very positional, same move, same routine, same move, same routine. And it kind of takes out that fun creativity aspect. And it just reminds me of like what Wayne Gretzky even said in the past. He didn't play one sport. He played all types of sports, and it developed such skill sets that he wouldn't have had if he just done one thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as I said, I think part of our problem now is that some of these kids are overcoached, right, at such a young age. You take someone like Allen Iverson. Imagine that someone took Allen Iverson and said, no, don't do that. You got to pass the ball. Like, we wouldn't have seen the brilliance that came through that level of exploration, right? And so I don't want to take that away from the kids, and hopefully the coaches, who are hearing this also allow that level of freedom and creativity, because we need that in the game for sure. We don't want to miss it, and to explore many different avenues of sports and outside of sports as well. And again, I think that ties back to when we talked about that identity, right? If all I do is basketball, then I'm a basketball player. But if I'm doing basketball and I'm also doing, whether it's something musically, and I'm doing, baseball, and now all of a sudden that level of pressure, it gets reduced, because it's not all on this to define who I am.
I'm noticing a lot, interesting enough, jiu-jitsu has become a popular sport in America, with Dana White pushing it, the UFC and so forth. But I'm noticing in jiu-jitsu, a lot of people identify themselves on their on Instagram as like Mike BJJ or whatever, so they're like totally identifying themselves as just a jiu-jitsu athlete, which is interesting, because it's like it kind of goes against to what we're preaching here, which is you're an athlete, or you're a professional, or whatever it may be. So it just came to my mind that I would have to, with my kids, be careful of stating just one direction is who you are, because that direction, if it doesn't lead to their outcome, then it could be a problem, right? Am I kind of in the realm of something here?
Whether it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, whatever the kids do, it could be a very big part of them, and they're free to say that I love it, I want to get better at this. But the moment they start to say, this is who I am and I have to make it, now all of a sudden that's where that pressure and expectation comes from, and potentially future disappointment. And that's not to say that they won't have success, but again, it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is an opportunity for you to grow into a better version of yourself, and that is the bigger opportunity.
I love that. All right, now if you could go back in time, Jason, and give yourself one piece of advice. I mean, you've given advice to a lot of kids, you've given advice to professional athletes. What advice would you give yourself if you could go back any point in time in your life?
Oof. Wow. I'm such a different person. I would say, lean into those fears, right? Those fears are the limitation. And oftentimes the things that you fear are the pathway to the life that you want to live. Right. And so, for me, we always have this kind of inner battle, which is the fears that the mind is generating, and this internal pull towards something that we know is true for us, but we can't get to that place because the mind is always creating worst case scenarios, right? And you need to be able to overcome that and really tap into what is that inner pull, okay? What is that inner fire that you have in you, and be able to overcome that fear, because on the other side of fear is potentially the most exciting chapter of your life.
Love that. There you have it, everybody. Jason Sousa with mindset coaching, athletic performance. What I've got from the podcast is, don't identify yourself as something just for the sake of it. Enjoy the journey, and don't allow yourself to be the victim. Don't allow yourself to use negative words to promote your behavior. So thank you, Jason, for coming on and sharing. We'll link your Instagram below, and we hope to have you on in the future when you finally do get into Cristiano Ronaldo's mind. At that point, don't forget us, and I look forward to seeing what you tapped in. So.
Likewise, and I really appreciate having me, and I look forward to seeing the growth of your podcast, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on.